Assalamu alaikum dear students. In the current session, I would talk about standardization of spelling and changes in pronunciation during the 19th and the 20th century. I hope and expect that by the end of this session, you would be able to understand the nature of the standardization procedures of spelling as well as how, and in what ways the pronunciation was dealt with. Well, my dear students, there are a few differences between Addison's punctuation and what we have today, or what we would consider to be correct. His use of capital letters, for instance, the apostrophe in the plural operas, this apostrophe, we find these things very close to our pronunciation and our spellings. And actually, there are very little changes in terms of spellings. So, the so-called greengrocer's apostrophe in plurals such as, potatoes and tomatoes is a recent innovation, consequence of declining educational standards. If we think these are the two reasons, this would be a misbelief. No, they are not a result of any recent innovation. They are also not a result of any declining educational standards. We have seen that there are traces in the history already present. Addison can be called an example, a good example of a good style in the 18th century, and his spelling is almost the same as we use today. Well, there are minor differences. For example, look at these words, carried and public. Sometimes these kind of abbreviated forms, and sometimes, this difference of C-K combination. But essentially, the system orthography, the system of orthography, by the way, is, the system of spellings. The study of the spellings of a language is called orthography. So, his system of orthography is the same as we use now. Well, my dear students, in early modern English, as well as when we go to, back to the Middle English, there had been no standard spelling, especially, during the Elizabethan period, during the Renaissance period, you would notice it was more a time of individualism. People would, write the spellings they would like. They would not care for standardization. And mainly the standard of spellings was, decided by the individuals. They would vary from writer to writer and even from work to work. The same writer would use different spellings. Here I'm going to give you a very interesting example. The example comes from Shakespeare. In his 3 different signatures that he did on his 2 wills, we found different spellings, use of 2 different spellings. One is these spellings, Shakespeare. These are the other spellings. So this is the first option. This is the second option. Here is the difference in the spellings. In the first one, this A is not used. In other works of other people, when they referred to Shakespeare, when they used his name, we come across certain other pronunciations and spellings as well. And these are the spellings that we find. These are the other 3 possibilities that we see. Shakespeare, even the pronunciation changes. And notice this. Shakespeare, this one. And shakes, this addition here. So all these varieties coexisted. My dear students, in fact, a very, very powerful source that played its role in standardizing spellings was the printing press. The same spelling would be disseminated. The same text, the same book would be produced, would be published in a bulk, would be printed in a bulk, and everybody would get the same version. So, all the people now were being made aware of the standard spellings. In fact, by the middle of the 16th century, still no standard system existed, but quite a number of widely accepted conventions were already present. However, by the end of the early modern period, spelling had become standardized in printed books. And, the variations that we find were only in private writings. What I just want to say is, mainly during the 19th and the 20th century, there was very less change in the spellings. As far as pronunciation is concerned, one of the results of the inconsistencies that existed previously, in the spellings, the pronunciation was also affected. I have just now, a couple of minutes ago, given you the examples of the word Shakespeare, how different pronunciations were resulting from different spellings or vice versa. This all happened with universal education and the wide dissemination of book, that now the process of standardization of spelling started taking place, which led towards standardization of pronunciation as well. New words were printed, and since they would go to everybody, now their pronunciation would also be the same. All the people would go for the same spellings, for the same pronunciation. However, notice this example. The word schedule, as it is pronounced, by the way, in British English, and the word schedule, as we pronounce it in American English. Anyways, right now focusing on the word, when we see, it began with S and was commonly spelled as this or this, schedule. The spelling with SCH, they date back from the mid-17th century time. So, this is how languages evolve. And it led to the present pronunciation. When these spelling SCH were introduced, this part, these spellings changed from these ones to this one. The result was this pronunciation. By the way, this is what? This is a sign of a sh pronunciation. So, the British pronunciation, schedule, because of these spellings. Or the American pronunciation, schedule, because of, again, these change of spellings. So, spellings and pronunciation were interconnected. In the late modern period, perhaps the most important change that has taken place is of the disappearance of R before consonants and before a pause. Formerly, the R was always pronounced in words like, words would be pronounced like barn, person, father, R sound would be produced. But, the change that came was, today in England, R is not produced, not in most of the dialects, and of course, not at all in RP, the standard English pronunciation. So these words are pronounced as barn, barn. R is silent. Person, R goes silent. And of course, father, towards the end when R comes, father, not father, Though Pakistanis, we have our own Pakistani pronunciation, we still pronounce that. Only if it occurs before a vowel, for example, father and mother. When this vowel comes after this, now this would be pronounced. If only father, then it is father, not father. If it is father and mother, then it would be pronounced like father and mother. So, this R would be pronounced, and this would go unstressed. It would be, brought down. So, overall, there were some significant changes with reference to pronunciation and spellings during the 19th and the 20th centuries.